What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the Future Maker podcast. Our guest today is Trace Carter, Director of Immersive Experiences at the Center of Science and Industry in Columbus, Ohio. He is also a disruptive curriculum programming strategist for educators around AI and virtual reality. He's also a husband and a father of two. I'm excited to have him on the Future Maker podcast as we think about virtual reality, digital experiences for educations and private and public institutions as we're going through a disruptive time and how we look at funding physical infrastructure and building digital infrastructure. Trace, welcome to the show.
Man, I'm extremely honored to be here. I'm excited as well.
Awesome. Well, I would love to know what got you into virtual reality. Maybe for people who don't know it too much, what is virtual reality in your opinion? But yeah, how'd you get into it?
Man, so fresh off the heels of the pandemic, right? Isolation, got my hands on a VR headset Christmas 2019, Oculus.
Now, this was did you buy it for your kids or you buy it for yourself?
I bought it for me.
Okay, nice.
I bought it for me exclusively, but I quickly saw the necessity to make sure that my kids got into the headset because you asked what is virtual reality. So I'm experiencing immersive content, sitting front row at sporting games, but on my couch. I'm exploring the International Space Station. I'm on canoes in Antarctica, all from my home. And my kids started being exposed to this, and I just saw like, wow, the ability to empower and to facilitate programming at home on a level like schools. No YMCA can compete with me right now. So I was locked in, but I really pivoted my life towards serving at that intersection of tech evolution and how it connects to people because I saw the digital divide. I got nieces and nephews, they're middle school, high school, and without intervention won't get their hands on VR headsets. So while it's being deployed in some of the suburban schools. So I just recognized from a talent development standpoint, exposure and development, I just needed to make sure that access can be given to those who may not can't afford several hundred or 3,500. So that's what I do, and that's how I got locked in.
Yeah. Now, I mean, 2019, we're in 2024. How much have you seen what VR was then to what it can do now? What's the capacity there?
What's interesting is I'm rather late to the VR party. Most people, when we're doing programming out in the community, we ask how long has VR or stereoscopic technology been around. Most people think, oh, early 2000s, 2010s, but we have artifacts that we travel around with late 1800s, right?
Wow.
Through the 1900s, watching this technology develop. So I've had to go back and do a lot of learning myself, but the Meta and the product that they've released, I think that was the nudge that brought it to front and center. This is a product we can begin. Really, VR is here from the developers showing up to the table and creating these experiences and investing millions of dollars because there's a major player who really put some innovation in the product. And I think Apple then pushed the boundary even further around the connectivity to your other devices. So I think between those two over these past 5 years, they've really pushed the envelope.
Now, with your work at COSI, is this a part of what your job is to do, is to look at emerging technologies that you guys can use? Or is this like naturally who you were always? Like how did you get to jumping on trends that's based in like the technology space?
Yeah, well, that work I've been doing my entire career, from building financial intelligence units on the heels of Bernie Madoff shenanigans to launching my own salon and branding firm in Columbus and shaking up the city. I actually met the president and CEO of COSI right after I got that headset, maybe 6 months when I'm really committed. And I know of COSI. Me and my kids go there multiple times a week at the time. They membership, we that. And I was interviewing Dr. Burtley for an unrelated project. And I said, if COSI doesn't pivot in the next 3 to 5 years, it'll be a museum for museums. And the CEO of the institution was like, let's get lunch. And ultimately, the role that I have at COSI, he created, because when I was sharing, bro, this is what VR is. The gaps we clearly just saw vividly with COVID shutting down education, digital. How do we do this in a more remote world? VR was that solution, and COSI, with all of its reputation, global impact, that being a hub where where that digital divide can be bridged.
Yeah, yeah. There's so many ways to take what you just said, and we'll get there. But I want to first double click on what you just said. It will be a museum for museums. When we think about the ecosystem of government, museums, education, physical experiences, what you're really saying to that one CEO, you just said to all CEOs. And why is that scary? And what do people need to be mindful of as they think about their institutions, and how can they create these digital experiences that you're now doing at COSI?
Yeah. COSI just celebrated its 60th year. When it was originated, there was no concept of Google search bars or YouTube. These very disruptive forms of how information flows, right? How these marvelous experiences that just once were only accessible in the museum, to now be able to have this at home on a more vivid level, it directly competes with their funding models and getting people into the building. So at the Science Center level first, really rethinking what is our role in the community with, at a Science Center specifically, the goal is science literacy. How do we reposition ourselves? But every institution has to recalibrate who were we to get where we are, but in light of everything that's happened the past 10 years, if you haven't taken inventory on what challenges who we are right now, getting to the next 10 years will be a challenge for sure.
Yeah. The other thing I naturally felt was fascinating about what you just said was you just went up to the guy and said this to him. Like, tell me more about tell me more about you as a kid, and like what built that confidence as a young man to just go up to someone as a CEO of an institution and say that directly to them. That was actually fascinating to me that you had the courage to do that.
I mean, I love Dr. Burley, respect him highly. But as an innovator, I felt like a peer, right?
Yeah.
We're serving the same city. I have a unique vantage and less years in the game. But I really was confident in who I was. I invested a lot in who I was. My early 20s, reading 50 books a year, not going out, no power, no how to get away with murder, none of those. I was culturally irrelevant because I was just really locked in. I was committed to that. Like I said, building these financial institutions, working with high caliber, right, cutting edge financial crisis, and just cutting my teeth there, then going to launch my own business. I mean, as an entrepreneur for over a decade, you earn your own respect when you got to go eat what you kill.
Yeah.
And it's like, and so by the time I showed up to Dr. Burley, it's like, family, I'm helping sharp. You with this insight.
Yeah, you're already sharp. Yeah.
And he respects that.
Yeah.
I think the great CEOs will respect that and make space for it. Some will be threatened by that.
Yeah.
But
tell me more about your cosmetology business, because it was fascinating when I learned about it, but it seems like it's something that you do regardless if it's virtual or physical experiences. You're always kind of thinking of a twist in a world where there's more advice being given because of data preferred recommendations. It seems like you're someone who constantly finds a way to put a spin or a twist to make it you. So tell me about like your framing and how you think of stuff to like get to the point of, hey, I want to start that business, and then how then it does what you do today.
I'll start here. Part of it is my ADHD. Behavioral defiance is one of the so I always just, whatever the status quo is, I just like to size it up just to see who, kick the tires on it. So I've always had that countering opinion on everything. Always been an artist, right? Like the ability to articulate myself to myself and then unto others, getting on stages in 4th, 5th grade, right? Speaking at a whole school, like building that confidence there. But I was 10 years old going to middle school, and I recognized the girl's going to be watching now. So I asked my single mom, 3 kids, can I get a haircut every day? And she says, absolutely not. But she bought me my first pair of clippers. So I learned how to cut my own hair at 10 years old. By 12, I'm cutting the whole hood up on her porch. Never saw it as a career path. Went and did all the JP Morgan, Discover bank building, while still had this passion and gifting that I had all this success in the professional realm. And I recognized, like, man, I got to do what I'm designed to do, you know, this purpose. And I made the pivot while I was still working full time. Went to hair school at night. And when I finished hair school, was still working, launched the salon. And in 1 month, I could tell, like, oh, man, this matched my monthly salary here in 30 days of launch. It was a disruptive membership packaging, you know, at a hair level. So that's how I got into it, man. My mom planted that seed at 10 because I was trying to look fresh.
Yeah. I love that. Like, I love the that you decided to get into it because of, you know, now you're interested in the opposite sex and wanting to explore, you know, getting a girlfriend. I think that's fascinating. I actually think a lot of brilliance starts that way. You know, like I took my first ever AP class because my wife was in it, you know, so she was the valedictorian. So I totally get that. Yeah. So, but you brought up where you're from. You're from Columbus, right? Like
born and raised.
Born and raised. So tell me about like just like the work you do from that lens, because one of my biggest fears about this world that we're walking into is that America is importing its greatest asset, and that is human capital. So the people who actually work on these things in America are often people who they first experience in America is at the university level that they got their visa on to then participate and explore. And then, you know, you constantly see that of the Fortune 500 CEOs, 60 are Indian Asian American. Right? Sundar Pichai, Satya Nadella. Yep. But their experience isn't a kid from Columbus, Ohio. Yep. So what does that mean for you? And like to have that experience, how important is that?
It's a great question. I thank you for asking that. Man, I represent the outcast, like from day one, you know, just coming from a troubled environment, not almost making it into this world just because of some of the young home origin issues that I faced. Didn't even know we were poor growing up, you know, and in my city, watching my city evolve over the past 30 plus years, right? We've had so much development, right? We got the largest investment from an entity with Intel coming to Columbus, Ohio, bringing semiconductor chip manufacturing, right? And it's happening in my city. So to watch how the world now pivots, right? People from LA, New York, Singapore, all coming to Columbus because they are engineers and just watching the tech hub that's brewing. I'm very proud, bro, because a lot of people left. All you people that left Columbus back in 04, 05, because Atlanta was popping, Charlotte is popping. Now you're moving back. You're humble now. But Columbus, man, I'm very proud of where it's become. And I have a real commitment to bringing it to fruition.
Yeah. So what would be your advice to parents, educators, when it comes to virtual experiences and getting your kids ready for this technological wave we're going through?
Man, I'll talk to parents first. It's going to require parents to not offload the responsibility, assuming that it is an outside agency's responsibility to equip your child to be successful in life. You know, like to recalibrate the entire educational system is an extension of what I'm setting at home. And like, that takes a lot of sacrifice. There are a lot of projects on my professional arena. I could be making a lot more, doing a lot more, but I'm recognizing I got 6 and 8 year old. This window of impressionability is so small and finite. I'd rather make that investment here. I can go get those opportunities later. So I just encourage parents, like, don't forsake that responsibility. With educators, you know, I'm encouraging them to rethink education and what's truly important. A lot of our educational system is based on memorization and just recall, but the skills of the future are going to look different. And I think every educator has to look in the mirror and just reevaluate, what does it look like to truly impart knowledge, and then simultaneously what really matters, And ultimately, sometimes it's going to require you to explore other educational systems. The school you might be at may not have that philosophy on the cutting edge, right? To my phone bans and like prohibiting students from being able to develop and grow as technology is going up and to the right. So being brave and courageous enough to pivot if it requires that.
Yeah.
That's what.
Cool. Well, I would like some like true takeaways on how have you used VR for experiences and development.
So I'll give a few practical examples. So we partnered with a nonprofit gala, and they wanted a really unique cutting edge experience there. So just as an extension of their programming at their event, being able to activate they were exploring the International Space Station but in full tuxedos, and were marveled. At a similar event, we had groups of people, they were parasailing in Zimbabwe. But they just came to an event. So it was one of those like, wow, breathtaking moments for people who just weren't ready. At an educational level, being able to find, instead of just reading about certain places in the world, like you can actually go visit ancient Rome and spatially see what these lives like. And I think it makes the opportunity to make learning more immersive, helps it stick and retain. But then also at a like business level, right? Designers being able to collab in digital realms that you like really lean into. What does it look like to lean into remote teams, but spatially be in the same room and collaborate at high levels? City planning, right? Where you can really get in here and manipulate, heights of buildings and seeing how to shadow cast in real time with other collaborators. It really optimizes the remote economy, global remote economy that we're going into. And so I think everything can't be on this Zoom, Google Meet, Teams, flat screen. We recognize there's limitations there. So I think VR is that next natural progression.
How do you feel about, like, you mentioned phone bans, you mentioned remote teams, but we're also living where you also have companies wanting people back in the office. What is your take on all of that? Like, people being very like, it sounds like we had the pandemic and then we got fatigued on technology. So now we don't want anything to do with it. So we now want to ban the phones from the classroom. We want everyone back in the office because we're tired of it. Do you think that's healthy for organizations and okay? Or what's your kind of POV there?
I'll start with the organizations. I know a lot of them have a vested interest in coming this building because we just paid $1.1 million for this refurbished foyer. So get back in here. I think that's one push there. But I do recognize being under the same building, if there's the capacity to do it, being in the room with another human, there just really is no other way to replicate just how special that is, right? The intangibles that we're getting better at replicating digitally, but nothing beats being in the same room where the organization sets the culture, the mood, the tempo. Those were nuances that led to some of the great organizations we see today. So I see why organizations want that. On the other hand, because we are a global market, because you can now hire the best talent anywhere in the world, we do have to rethink what does it look like to impart and facilitate that culture and team commitment, but do it in a way that enables those to be optimized while they're digitally or remote. As it relates to students, I think a lot of the banning and all this is just written in fear, like these things that clearly they can pick up their phone, Google, ChatGPT, figure out all the answers. And it's like, instead of doing all that, we're just going to ban it. And it's like, I think it doesn't set them up for success when they get to college or the real world where they don't know how to balance now. It's like it was banned and now it's on me. We didn't teach them how to fully integrate it into their daily life, how to plan with it, how to, set screen time and some of those just practical realities of how to be a good human later. Banning it just almost creates remorse in my mind. In my mind, I'm not in it from a student perspective, but it would make me look at the teachers and be like, do you see the world? It would make me like you're losing credibility with me because you clearly don't see where the world's going. What you mean don't use my phone? What work are you doing without your phone? We don't collaborate. All your testing is independent. And then you get into the world, you collaborate. We sitting at tables with our team. Like, and bringing our best ideas and leveraging tools. And so I don't think we're training our students to be functioning adults. We're training them to pass these tests, and that model will not work moving forward, where we need humans to know how to critically think, plan, strategize, adapt, and recalibrate as our world turns. So
it seems like you're hitting on like the physical, like we're holding up current institutions or economic powers that allows us to sustain, right? You started this off talking about real estate. They just spent money on real estate, and corporate assets are important to our portfolio. So in order for that asset to stay valuable, we must be in the building. Then you ended with, we take these tests to show that our schools are performing well. So us as an asset to the country. And so a lot of the challenge right now with this disruption is holding up old forms of assets that allow us to survive today, but possibly limiting the growth of understanding of new assets that our kids are going to miss on if we don't prepare them for this technological wave.
Spot on. Other global competitors are optimizing their children in a different way. We travel around the entire globe as a science center, and the way that the high school students are talking in India, way different than how they're talking in Columbus. And so, because it will be a global economy, I think it's like the young people of America are not being trained and prepared at mass as some of the other places are. So they're leaning into AI and all of it being integrated into the classroom. So
one of my fears of the phone bans is like, and I could get canceled for this part, but I think a lot of homeschool families and communities invest in what we do because they see this weakness. But you can tell when you're hanging out with a homeschool kid compared to a public school kid, because you just didn't have as many social reps, right? And so you just know you're a little, when it comes to having the experience, socially interacting. Now you take a phone out of a kid's hand. I think it's the debt, the same similar expense, where you go like, oh, I could tell your parents don't let you have a phone. In a way.
Yeah. I want to connect. You do bring up a good point, because on one hand, I empathize with teachers, because it is a tough, especially when they're underpaid and I got too many students in here. And what I recognize is the parent hands the phone to the child, and the child medicates with it. It's unbridled access. And so I can see in a classroom environment where if they're not trained by parents how to use this tech, and like it is this big distraction in the classroom, all trying to share YouTube videos. So I could see where teachers get to a point like, this is the easiest way for me to maintain my environment. But to your point, the whole environment has to be rethought about then if we're going, we can't keep doing that.
Yeah. Cause I always kind of shared the idea of like, I actually think phone bans are appropriate. Like in a building during a learning lesson, the phone, you can't learn what the other person is talking about while they're talking. And the data shows that. However, the same way you and I had typing class, kids just now need swiping class. So one of the 7 periods or 8 periods of the day is about, all right, kids, we're going to pull out your phones. Today's lessons plans is understanding algorithms and controlling your knowledge stack. These are the ways that you integrate the phones into the classroom. Because I do think the research and the data around phone bans is good for teachers. And I want teachers to have that space to be able to connect with their kids without their phone.
Agreed.
Because you even know when you have that ability with your own wife or your own kids to put down the phone, to really learn from each other. And I think teachers deserve that.
Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree.
Something we didn't bring up is you didn't take the traditional path to school. You don't have a college degree, correct?
Correct. Cool. Well, I started down the formal path right out of high school. Wasn't clear what I wanted to be, but went to college just because you're supposed to. Shortly thereafter, was back home. And I went right into the job market. And once you get into the market and demonstrate skill, I seized every opportunity that was in front of me. I didn't show up to work like, oh, this isn't my dream job, so I'm going to just give it halfway. Like, I showed all the way up. Leadership saw that. Leadership invested in that. So even early in my career, I didn't have a formal degree, but all the manager trainings, all this, like, really adding to my tool belt, the organizations were paying for. Then I got headhunted by other organizations because we were just doing a very unique type of work in the fraud space. And I think if I were in charge and could make this, I think it was so critical for me to have that time in the marketplace, figuring out what I liked, didn't like about work, because that's what helped me to really get clear on, I want to launch a salon and I have functional skills to do it. Once I finally met Dr. Burley and got clear around digital technology at 30, 33, 34 or older in my life, I went back to Wharton, went back to MIT and got certified through, like, in the work that I'm doing, versus a lot of my peers have these degrees still paying on debt for work they're no longer even doing. They're not even in the same stratosphere with it. So for me, it was a very unique path where skills and experience it started to trump everybody's theoretical, I have a degree, but organizations change the requirements on the rec once they engage TC, because it's like that you have in the field training that can't be summarized in a degree. So it's really worked.
What is your advice to people who feel like they can't succeed in today's economic setup because they didn't get a college degree? Like, they don't feel like their real world experience is powerful enough. How do you empower others to, college dropouts who feel like now all I can be is, in the bar scene, the restaurant scene.
Yep.
I don't know how to break out. What's your advice to those people?
I would say, if you look out in the world, what problem can you lend your sword to the fight in solving? There's some solution you can bring to the table that when you're fixing somebody's pain point or alleviating some pressure in their life, for me, because I had learned the skill of haircutting, it was a skill I could pull off my tool belt and fix somebody else's problem with. And I think a lot of those who, you may not have gone the traditional collegiate route, but there are some skills that you have. You might be doing stuff on the side independently, or the passion projects at work you're taking on that's not even in your job. They might represent a skill set that I could be intentional with, really refine, lean into. And without a college degree, you could be just a 3-month training away to, like, oh, I'm optimized to go in this direction. Not to belabor this point, but I also encourage, do not chase the salary, especially out of the gate, because it's really about acquiring the skill set. The real asset is you. It's knowing, where do I want to be, at least generally, and what is a one step towards that, the second step, versus a lot of people try to hit the home run right out of the gate, or I'm declining opportunities because it's not 6 figures, all this kind of these metrics that aren't necessarily realistic. So patient, perseverance, but really lean into problem first solutions.
Yeah. I want to kind of wrap up this time, and it's been great to be with you today, is, the Future Maker podcast is all about dealing with what scares us, with this uncertain chaos that we're all navigating through with all these different breakthrough technologies. What scares you, and how are you navigating that anxiety, not just for yourself, but obviously you talk about your kids a lot and their potential.
Bro, cybersecurity keeps me up at night. I'm recognizing, as an older man who's given 2 decades of data to as many apps as you can imagine, and to now understand how quickly AI can absorb that data, synthesize that data, and in real time make decisions around that data, it's daunting to think at the level of accuracy I could be known and in some way, potentially manipulated, or this data just used in a malicious way. And so that will only progress. And for my kids, what does it look like to engage in the internet in a safe manner when smartphones and smart technologies, Siri's all integrated, robots walking in the crib helping. It's like, what does security look like and privacy in those environments? That scares me.
Yeah. Well, I feel the people who listen to the Future Maker podcast have more clarity and are less scared because of your time with us.
You're poised.